Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Independent Thought. I am your host, Desmond Price. Thank you for all of the people who are tuning in to this episode of Independent Thought today. I want to welcome any new listeners who are listening for the first time, and welcome back to all of my subscribers. Thank you for hitting that subscribe button. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and turn on the little notification bell so that you do not miss any episodes. I want to apologize firstly for this late episode. I was having some issues with the podcast over the weekend. Normally, episodes drop on Monday. They didn't this week. I hope no one's too upset about that. Anyway, it was hard for me to figure out exactly what the topic was going to be for this week. I was having some issues kind of bouncing back and forth. But I did know that I wanted to address 9/11 in some way, shape, or form. It has been 20 years since those attacks happened on September 11th in 2001. I knew I wanted to do some type of episode around it. I originally thought about doing something centered around the Patriot Act. I still might do an episode around the Patriot Act, but I just wanted to touch on something that I could not get my mind off of in regards to 9/11. Because when it comes to 9/11, there's a lot of different angles you can take with it. You can take some of the good that came out of 9/11, which I know sounds, pretty terrible to say, but, I'm thinking about what happened in the aftermath when we talk about the community that people sensed around the country as they became united, as partisanship kind of went to the wayside, as people became very patriotic for a small amount of time afterwards, as the country seemed to be united in our common just need to be safe, to be secure, to see what happened in New York on that day, and also at the Pentagon. It sparked something in the country that a lot of people have talked about since then that they feel like we need more of, which is just this sense of just, I guess, overall community amongst Americans. But with all that being said, there's a lot of bad things that came after 9/11. 9/11 was used as a pretense to enact many things in our country, including the Patriot Act, expanding the size of our government. Under the Bush administration, the size of our federal government tripled. Military budget ballooned to a height that it's never come down from. I think currently the last estimate I saw was that we were spending $780 billion every single year on our military, or on our defense department as a whole, rather. We spent $2 trillion in our war in Afghanistan, just particularly. And so lots of money has been spent on what some are calling a wasted endeavor. And I don't want to forget whatsoever Guantanamo Bay and all of the people who were detained without any due process and tortured subsequently while they were being held without due process, some of who were never even charged as being terrorists. They were just suspected, and we were never told why they were suspected. But I want to talk about drone strikes, because that is something that I feel as though needs more of a conversation around. So let's talk a little bit about drone strikes that we've carried out, not just, in Afghanistan, but throughout the Middle East. Because when I say the word drone strikes, and I say drone strikes that America has carried out, you're probably thinking of countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. Those are probably the countries that come to your mind, countries that we've had active conflicts in. But these aren't the only countries that we've been having drone strikes in, unfortunately. There's also been drone strikes in countries like Somalia, Yemen, and Pakistan, countries that we had no active conflicts in, yet we were still sending drones into those countries to strike targets that we deemed were a threat. And before I go any further, I forgot to do this at the top of the episode, but before we get too any farther, some of the sources I have for today's episode include NBC, Last week tonight, the New York Times, U.S. News, and Breaking Points. Oh, and the Atlantic. Almost forgot about the Atlantic. Okay, so getting back into this a little bit, it was said, and again, this is actually from years ago, under the Obama administration, it was said that there were certain rules for drone strikes. Attorney General Eric Holder, under the Obama administration, said that even though we carried out these drone strikes at an increasingly high rate, the Obama administration, deployed, I think, 8 times more drone strikes than the Bush administration did. But they said that there were rules as far as using these drone strikes were concerned. For instance, one of the rules said that the target must be an imminent threat, that capture was not feasible, and that they were confident that they were in no way, shape, or form violating international law. And so I want to just quickly address some of these points, because it was later found out that even though Attorney General Holder said that a target must be an imminent threat for us to issue a drone strike, we later found out that apparently imminent threat does not require the U.S. to have clear evidence that a specific attack on a U.S. person or interest will actually take place in the immediate future. So imagine that for a second. Imagine that we're calling something an imminent threat, but then later saying, well, that doesn't actually mean that they're going to threaten anyone or anytime soon, if at all. But we're just going to call it an imminent threat so that we have the pretense to said strike this person or persons. There are so many different things wrong with that. I'm going to try to contain myself for a second here. I'm going to save a lot of my opinion for the end here, but it's unconscionable to me that we don't really have to declare if someone's actually a threat or not to kill them. I mean, we can use words like attack or strike or whatever the case it may be, but we're talking about murder here. So let's just call it what it is. And not only that, but these people didn't even have to be militants. According to Scott Shane of the New York Times, the CIA classified all able-bodied males of a certain age to be militants. And that was only unless they had hard evidence to prove that they were innocent. Not that they were guilty, but that they were innocent. So the CIA said, hey, unless we can prove these guys aren't terrorists, they are terrorists. And so, yes, you can kill them. Have at it. Does anyone see anything wrong with that? We'll stop this episode for a second, take a quick little pause break, stop and think about that for a second, that we just gave ourselves license to kill innocent people because we felt like it. Okay. Not only that, but we didn't know who we were killing sometimes. Sometimes we would send out drone strikes. We would not know who we were attacking. And not only that, but after we killed people, we did not always know how many people died. Sometimes when they would show the logs of the death tolls from these drone strikes attacks, they would have figures like 17 to 20 or between 20 and 30, or the more accurate figures we don't really know because we didn't bother to count. We just kind of we think it's this many, so we're not really sure. And that's going to come into play later as I go into another stat that I want to talk about. But this wasn't just like a one-off thing. This wasn't just under one presidency. This is kind of how drone strikes were operating, for the entire time that we were using them over in the Middle East. In fact, our very first drone strike in 2002 was on a target who we believed to be bin Laden. And the reasoning for that was, quote unquote, because of his height. So again, we didn't know who we were attacking, but because of his height, we thought we were attacking bin Laden, only to find out it was actually just an innocent civilian who was just happening to be collecting scrap metal. That was that person's crime, and we killed them. Nothing more, nothing less. And did the media report on that? No, they certainly did not. So, on top of all that, what we were seeing in our country for the longest time was just this unchecked amounts of authority when it came to drone strikes. And this was concerning to a lot of people, including Rosa Brooks, who's a former advisor to the Defense Department. she had some thoughts when she was giving some testimony to Congress. Here's a clip of what she had to say.
Right now, we have the executive branch making a claim that it has the right to kill anyone, anywhere on earth, at any time, for secret reasons based on secret evidence in a secret process undertaken by unidentified officials. That frightens me.
Truthfully, it should frighten us all. I mean, how could it not? Right? You would assume anyway. And so in recent years, the Pentagon has confirmed, actually, let me say this a little more directly. This year, in 2021, the Pentagon confirmed that the Biden administration had added new restrictions to drone strikes so that there was, I guess, a little more of a vetting process before we were just killing however we saw fit. And so let's fast forward to the event that happened more recently and to the reason why I'm bringing this up now. As most of you know, during our withdrawal from Afghanistan, there was an attack on the airport in Kabul in Afghanistan. Now, during this attack, 60 Afghans and 13 US troops were killed. Now, a lot of people were really upset about this happening. And why shouldn't they be? The loss of life is an incredibly upsetting thing, especially for the families involved. You know, it seemed like it was a very preventable thing. A lot of people were talking about Biden's plans as far as the withdrawal was concerned, how he could let this happen. And so, in retaliation for this attack, we decided to send out an airstrike against a person that we were calling a member of ISIS-K. Now, this drone strike happened very shortly after the attack on the Kabul airport. I believe it was the very next day. We were told that the ISIS-K member was in fact killed and that no one else died. That was the official report that we were given from the Biden administration. Now, Evan Hill, who is a reporter for the New York Times, and I got to say, definitely check this person out, because when I was doing research for this episode, I came across this person's reporting and they did a phenomenal job. They truly did. I have a link to their article in the description of this episode. Stop what you're doing after this episode's over. Go into the description, check out this person's link. Highly recommend it. But Evan Hill, a reporter for the New York Times, decided that they were going to do some investigating into this alleged ISIS-K member who we took out with the drone strike, because there were some reports that some civilians happened to be killed in the attack, even though originally we said that only the ISIS-K member was in fact killed in this drone strike that we did. And we came to find out through Evan Hill's reporting that not only were there civilians that were killed, but it seems as though the person that we targeted with this drone strike was not in fact at all a member of ISIS-K. According to this reporting, this person was a civilian who was working at a local aid office who specialized in malnutrition for an agency that he worked at in Afghanistan that actually was partnered with a US company. This was actually a person who was planning on coming here as an Afghan refugee, as one of the evacuees. So this person was actually followed by one of our drones for about 8 hours the day of the strike. And our drone followed this person from location to location before it actually initiated the attack. And after following said person for 8 hours, it waited until this person went home. And then as this person was pulling their car into their driveway and their family came out to meet them, a bunch of babies, literally just very small children, came out to meet this person like in the courtyard as they were coming home from work. That is the moment that we chose to have our drone attack this person. And the drone killed everyone. Everyone. the person, all of his children, and his extended family, all innocent civilians, dead. Now, the thing I really want to hammer home here is that to verify this, Evan Hill went to Afghanistan. This reporter went to Afghanistan, spoke with the family, and through watching security footage that he could obtain, he was able to see that this person was not, in fact, in any way, shape, or form, a member of ISIS. He was just a regular guy, just distributing food, water, and supplies to needy people in and around Kabul. And now the government has since admitted to the New York Times that they did not know who this guy was, even though they tracked him all throughout that day. And I honestly, I can't even wrap my head around this. Let me give you some extra stats that makes this completely unbearable. We spend, and I bullshit you not, we spend $80 billion a year on our intelligence departments. $80 billion a year. That's how much money we spend on our intelligence departments. And for those of you who listened to one of my previous episodes, that would fix all of the issues for all the lead pipes that we have in our country 2 times over if we put the money for 1 year for these intelligence agencies into fixing our lead pipes. But I'm going to get off that subject for today. That is the number we pay to the CIA, the NSA, Department of Homeland Security, the NRO, all these entities. We give them that much money every single year, and they were outworked by one reporter for the New York Times who decided to fly to Afghanistan and was able to obtain more information in probably a day or two than our sophisticated intelligence agencies. They picked this person out and committed a drone strike against an innocent civilian, and they somehow just did not know after tracking this person for 8 hours that this person was not a member of ISIS. So one of 2 things is true here. Either we are that incompetent that we couldn't figure out that we had the wrong target, that wasn't the person who carried out the attack on the airport, or we didn't care and we just wanted to have someone die so that we can say that we caught the person who made the attack on the airport. I don't know which one it is, but either way, it's fucking horrendous. Truly. And so let me go back to what Eric Holder said, the Attorney General under the Obama administration. He said that we carry out drone strikes if someone's an imminent threat, capture is not feasible, and we're not violating international law. So we already went over the fact that what we think of as an imminent threat isn't actually an imminent threat. So we followed this person around for 8 hours, figured out that we could have easily have seen this person was just distributing aid. We probably knew, or at least we couldn't confirm, that this person was a member of ISIS. It seemed pretty feasible if you're following this person around for 8 hours that you could have captured them. And so the only question is, well, did you violate international law? Well, we did not know for sure that this person was a member of ISIS. We just didn't know that. And under international humanitarian law, it says that intentional attacks on civilians or attacks that do not distinguish between military targets and civilians are prohibited under all circumstances, also known as a war crime. And so what is the last thing that we did in Afghanistan before leaving? We committed another war crime. And by another, I mean that's not the first time that we've killed civilians. Obviously, according to US News, we've killed approximately 360,000 civilians across the Middle East over the last 2 decades. Now, I want you to all think about some of the anger and just resentment and just pure sadness that people here in America were feeling for the 13 dead service members who died at the airport in Kabul just a few weeks ago. People were calling for Biden's impeachment. They were talking about how could he mess this up. They were saying that, he should resign immediately because 13 people died on his watch. Now take that same idea and just think for a second that we've killed 360,000 civilians, at least. And that's just estimates that we can generate. We don't actually know the real number because we never tracked the real number. We don't know how many people we've killed over in the Middle East. And so when I think about the legacy of our time in the Middle East, when I think about everything that's happened after 9/11, again, we could talk about the Patriot Act. We could talk about our expanded government. We could talk about how much money we spend on the Department of Defense, how they cannot be audited, how the Pentagon does not even have to disclose how they're spending the money. We could talk about the fact that in the name of freedom, we are actually have taken freedoms away from people. We could talk about Guantanamo Bay. We could talk about torture. There are a lot of things that have happened in the name of 9/11 that we've done since 9/11. But one of the things that I will never forgive this country for is our drone strike policy. And truthfully, I think the first time this was brought to my attention was by John Oliver when he did his piece on this back in 2014. And I referenced that a little bit during this piece that I made here. I went back and rewatched that. I recommend that you guys do as well. I'll have the link for that video in this description. But that listening to that video, it kind of scarred me. I'll never get over it. Just hearing the cavalierness of people talking about these drone strikes as if these people's lives didn't matter. It just feels like a true hypocrisy of our mission. We went over to the Middle East to get retribution for acts of terrorism that were committed against America. And in doing so, we've committed a much higher scale of terrorism on the people of that region. Truthfully, the definition of terrorism is the unlawful use of violence, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. And so in order to protect ourselves from terrorism, we in fact, in a lot of ways, can be characterized as now being the terrorists. And that is a stain on our country. It's a stain on our legacy as a nation. I mean, truthfully, I don't know how else to phrase it. I mean, again and again and again, we took civilian lives without any real thought about it and without a whole lot of care. The media has been going wild talking about Afghanistan for the last few weeks, for the last month and a half, as we were getting ready to withdraw, saying, how dare we withdraw from Afghanistan? What are we going to do if we leave there? Think about all the people who won't be safe. Think about the women, how they're going to be subjected to the Taliban. I feel for the women who are going to be subjected to the Taliban's rule. And I see the articles about it every single day. But the articles I did not see? The articles I did not see were all the innocent lives that we have killed every single year since we've been in that region. There were no headlines about that. There were no headlines talking about all the people that we left in unmarked graves and all the people who will never see their families again. We didn't talk about the fact that, ISIS, did not exist before we went over into the Middle East. Most historians agree that ISIS sprouted out of Iraq after we invaded the country back in 2003. Maybe we've created more terrorism than we actually solved by being in Afghanistan. Maybe that is really our legacy, that we went over there to solve a problem and we actually amplified it. And so that is really my take on this issue. I know that some people don't feel the same way. They think that, they live over in Afghanistan, so this is their fault or some bullshit. I don't even know. I don't understand it. I don't understand people who are overly callous about this, or they don't seem to care about the the Afghan lives or the Iraqi lives that were lost during our wars over there. Those are people just like us. Their lives are now extinguished because we didn't try hard enough to distinguish between civilians and actual terrorists. And I'd say we have to live with that, but nobody seems to care. And that's why I'm talking about it today. So with that being said, we're going to take a quick break now. And when we come back, we're going to have our guest for this week. Stay tuned. Welcome back from the break, everyone. Thank you for sticking with me through this episode of Independent Thought. I want to first thank my guest. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Everyone should go check out the Winner Gets Nothing podcast. Tom, you are definitely appreciated. I hope to have you back on the podcast in the future. I will probably have you on a panel here pretty soon. Just keep your DMs open. I'll probably be coming after you for an upcoming YouTube panel episode. But with all that being said, if you liked this episode and you have not already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. I didn't think I'd have to ask people to turn on notifications because I figured if you subscribed, certain platforms would just notify you when new episodes come out. But Spotify most definitely does not. You have to hit their little bell or else, forget about it. Apple normally will, but for whatever reason, I've been having some issues with them recently. So that's kind of a hit or miss thing. So yes, make sure your notifications are turned on if you are listening to this right now. As far as what's coming into the future for the podcast, there is a link in my description for my YouTube channel. Go ahead and hit subscribe on my YouTube channel because I'm going to be having quite a few different YouTube exclusives coming in the next few months. They're going to be episodes that will not be on the audio version of this podcast. They will only be on YouTube. And I think you don't want to miss them. I can't tell you exactly what they're going to be just yet, but I will be updating you in future episodes here, but there will be several of them. So make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel. Now, to close out this episode, I kind of want to just touch on a couple different things coming from my first segment. I didn't mention this in the first segment, but I want to be very, very clear about one thing in particular. While I do feel there is a lot of negatives in regards to everything that our country has done since 9/11, I don't want that to discount the service that service members gave to the country. Just because our country has done things that are wrong does not mean that your service to the country was wrong or that it was in vain somehow. I feel as though, especially young people who enlisted like right out of high school or, like right after high school. I mean, people who do that with the noblest of intentions. They truly are trying to protect the country. They're trying to protect their family. They're fighting for what they believe, like what they believe in. They are making potentially the ultimate sacrifice to protect everyone around them. That is one of the noblest things that you possibly could do, is to sign up for what could be maybe the last thing that you ever do in an effort to protect everyone you've ever cared about. That's noble. That's honorable. And in no way, shape, or form is me criticizing our government or the leadership in our military an indictment on you or or any person who served. I don't want people to think that attacking our leadership is attacking the people who were involved in the military. Those people were just trying to do what they thought was right. It's not their fault that they were I personally believe that they were led astray. That I think that leadership, time and time again, did not care about the repercussions of the actions that they were asking our service members to go out and commit. They did not care about how long this conflict dragged on for. They did not care about how many people they asked to be in harm's way. They just did not care if they kept sending more and more of our fellow Americans to die in places they didn't need to die in, or if they asked them to take the lives of people whose lives they didn't have to take. That's not your fault. That's not anyone's fault who was involved with that. You know, the blame rides solely on the shoulders of the people who were giving the orders. That's how I see this. And this story has bothered me immensely because throughout most of the month of August, I sat there and watched the media go absolutely just relentless, attacking Joe Biden for withdrawing from Iraq, from Afghanistan, just relentlessly, just over and over and over and over again. And not only that, but it was just like piece after piece after piece about how terrible the Taliban was, as if this was breaking news, as if this wasn't always who the Taliban was, as if this was some revelation that they acted this way, that they had these beliefs, that they were who they, like who they were. So I understand that it's a little different because they were taking over the country at this moment in time. But truthfully, it would have been a lot more bearable to take if the media had been this consistent with all of the atrocities that had been happening in the Middle East, all of them, including our own. But it wasn't. It was not whatsoever. Obviously, the repression of women in Afghanistan is worth talking about. Obviously, US service members being killed in a bombing at an airport is worth talking about. But why aren't the lives of the hundreds of thousands of civilians who died over there? Why wasn't that worth talking about? Why didn't their lives matter? Why is it that we as Americans seem to prioritize our lives over everyone else's lives, as if because we were born on dirt in this part of the world, we somehow have more value than people who were born on dirt in other parts of the world? That much I just do not understand. And so I will, like I said during the first segment, I will never forgive our country for what they've done to the people of that region. We have probably created more people who are willing to create acts of terror than there ever were before we ever stepped foot over there 2 decades ago. And who knows what kind of repercussions that will come with in the future. Hopefully there won't be any, but I don't know. It's a hard thing to think about, because I think, for instance, if a radical group like the KKK went into China and attacked them, and then China afterwards decided that they were going to carry out random drone strikes here in America on any target they deemed relevant, even though it didn't have to be any kind of militant target, and they did that for 20 years straight, I bet by the time that they were done, there'd be a lot of anti-China sentiment in our country. It would just be natural. And I just can't even imagine what kind of history we've left in Afghanistan after everything that we've done, in Iraq after everything that we've done. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not sure that we'll know in the not too distant future, but all I have to say is that, as I'm closing out this episode, I hope that everyone will take a broader look at what our true legacy is when it comes to this war in the Middle East, because it's worth telling. And in a really strange way, this is actually, a very similar conversation to the conversation that I had with everyone in the second episode of this season when I talked about critical race theory. Because during that episode, it was one of the things that was brought up was maybe, like it's patriotic to only talk about the good parts of our history. And the reply to that was, well, let's just tell the whole picture and, let people make up what they will about the country as a whole once they know everything that we've done. I think that logic still applies, especially with this. I think people of this country should know everything that we've done over in the Middle East, because I don't think that they really do. I don't think that most people know about our drone strike policy. I don't think that they know how many people that we've killed. Maybe they should know. Maybe we should talk about it. If you enjoyed this episode, please go ahead and share this on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Thank you so much for being here. See you next time.